Today, I'm going to show you how to change your nasty old ball joint to a shiny new ball joint on your 2004 or early 2000 Toyota Corolla. Stick with me.
The first thing we're going to do is remove the castle nut, and the castle nut is held on by a cotter pin. It's kind of a pain in the rear sometimes to take out this cotter pin, and I use just a pair of pliers and sometimes a couple pairs of pliers, and you have to pull, you have to push, you have to bend. Most of the time you just end up breaking it off. The next thing we want to do is take off that castle nut. That castle nut is big. On the stock OEM ball joints, that castle nut is usually 22 millimeters. Without removing that CV shaft, you're not going to be able to get in there without a wrench, so just be patient. It's going to take many turns to get that castle nut all the way off, but you don't want to take it all the way off yet. You're going to have to release the ball joint from the knuckle before you do that. And the way we're going to do that is with a lot of WD-40 and a pickle fork. A pickle fork is really cheap. It's under $10 because it's literally just a piece of metal that you hit with the hammer a whole bunch of times. You're going to ruin the boot on your old ball joint, but you're not going to use this at all on your new ball joint, so don't worry about that. You do end up having to hit sometimes a bunch of times to get that thing loose, just depending on your vehicle, just depending on how long those ball joints have been on there, but it usually is seated pretty tight, and I usually have to get a couple different hammers and whack that pickle fork in a couple different directions. Once that you pop that joint loose, you're going to take the castle nut all the way off, and then you are free from the upper knuckle. Now don't release it from the upper knuckle yet, because you're going to want to take those big 19 millimeter nuts off of the ball joint that connects it to the lower control arm before you do anything else. And with this, I do have to use my breaker bar, and I've got a couple different sizes to get down to that 19 millimeter socket. I want to use a 6-point and not a 12-point because a 12-point socket will for sure strip these bolts because of how much tension I have to put on them. I end up having to use my lay under the car and push it with my feet method to do this, because one of my nuts that were on the bottom here was apparently put on by the world's strongest man, and a regular breaker bar and hitting with a hammer and WD-40 would not get this thing off. So I eventually did get it, but it just took a while, and I had to go through several different sockets. I actually broke one of my extensions. It's okay, it was Craftsman. I got it replaced for free. No big deal. Once these 3 nuts are off, the ball joint is completely loose and free, and all you need to do is push down on the lower control arm, and you are able to slide the ball joint out. Now the great thing is, that wasn't very many steps, and that's the same steps you need to do to put the new ball joint in. Just grab it, push down the lower control arm, slide and line up your bolts, align the ball joint in the upper knuckle, and just pop it in. You don't need to worry about the pickle fork anymore, and you also don't need to worry about seating that knuckle very tight in the upper knuckle, because the weight of the car and driving on just regular paved roads will seat that ball joint in that knuckle just fine. On all bolts on the car, you should look up your torque specs, but I'm just going to tell you that the bottom ones underneath the control arm end up having to be really tight, so you're not going to hurt anything by tightening them with all your might. The only real annoying thing about putting this back together is getting that castle nut back on the top of the ball joint and then putting that cotter pin back in. You want to tighten that castle nut all the way, but you also have to be able to slide the cotter pin through the hole in the bolt. What I do for the castle nut on ball joints is I usually go as tight as I can go, and then I back it up to where I can slide the cotter pin through the hole and then bend them over, and it usually is perfect torque specs. Now once you bend that cotter pin over, you're good to go and you're done.
So that's it. It's complete. Shiny new ball joint, old nasty ball joint. You can do this. You don't need to take this to a shop. You can do this with basic tools in your driveway. I did it. You can do it. If you found value in this and you want to see more like this, don't forget to hit subscribe.